So some people believe that everything that's happening in the world right now was actually predicted thousands of years ago. There's a passage in the Bible written almost 2,000 years ago, Revelation 13, verse 17. It says, "A mark will be required, placed on your right hand or your forehead, and without that mark, you cannot buy and you cannot sell." This is called the mark of the beast. And for most of human history, people assumed that this was just a metaphor from the Bible, kind of symbolic message that ancient texts used to describe power and controls in ways that people could visualize at that time, because obviously nobody could imagine the technology that would make this possible today. But if you're paying attention to the world and everything that's going on today, it almost seems like everything we're watching is part of some manufactured crisis, a transition in human history with a new opportunity to centralize power.
We are now moving from the industrial age to the intelligent age. We are living in the transition to a new time, which will change everything. It will change how we communicate, how we work, how we live. But now in this new age, the base will be knowledge, data, and intelligent insights.
Now, in the modern world, people call this prophecy the digital control grid. And I know how it sounds conspiratorial, but I want to show you some things that are actually happening right now. In 2025, a company co-founded by Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, started deploying a device called the Orb. It's a silver sphere about the size of a bowling ball, and what it does is it scans the iris of your eye to get what's called your biometric signature. It's the one thing about your body that's completely unique to you and can never be changed. Now, in exchange for that scan, you will get something called a World ID, which is a digital proof that you are a real human being. As of right now, over 18 million people have already done this voluntarily. Why would they do that? It's because in a world of AI and robots, how do you prove you're actually a real person? This is how. The World ID is now being integrated into apps like Tinder, DocuSign, Zoom, Shopify, and dozens of other platforms. Sam Altman has said that proof of human will eventually be required by every website, every app, every transaction on the internet.
People are really going to need this and really going to need to do this in a privacy-preserving way. So World ID is our effort at that. And our goal is to make World ID be this new proof of human for the internet.
At the same time, the United States passed something called the Genius Act, which is a law that creates the legal framework for stablecoins, aka digital dollars. And what makes a stablecoin different from the cash in your bank account is that it can be programmed. It can be given rules. Rules about where it can be spent, on what, and when it expires, and whether it works outside a certain area. The World Economic Forum is also now arguing that water, soil, and even the air we breathe needs to be assigned a financial value. It needs to have a price, and it needs to be measured.
Now we need to put the economics of water, not only in terms of monetary values, but also in terms of governance, in terms of recognizing water as a commons that we now need to manage as a broad systems approach.
If we're going to protect natural systems, one of the solutions is to bring nature onto the balance sheet, to bring nature into the ways that decisions are made within business, to allocate a value to it and to bring it into accounting and financial mechanisms.
Basically, it means the air and water should not be freely accessible. They should be a financial asset. And while all of this is happening, there's been a huge build out of cameras, satellites, cell towers, and AI data centers in communities all across the world. Now, some of this framework was brought to light by Catherine Austin Fitts, who used to be the Assistant Secretary of Housing under President Bush. And she talks about a specific plan of how this is going to look like. She says that there's 3 parts that are being built that have never existed before in human history.
So there are 3 sort of pillars that I track. One is the programmable money, and that's what we at Solari are trying to stop. The second is the digital ID, because you need digital ID systems that are interoperable globally, and then the local hardware. And those are sort of the three pillars.
Programmable money, the global digital identity system, and the surveillance hardware to enforce both of those systems. And she says that when all three are complete, the people who control that system, aka the central planners, those people will not need laws to influence society. They're not going to need the police or the courts. If they want you to do something, and for some reason you're not doing it, they'll just turn off some important aspect of our lives. Whether it's the money we use, the IDs we need, or they could just restrict our ability to buy and sell or travel somewhere unless we comply.
My ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
That's why some people believe that this was a prophecy that came from the Bible. So in this video, I want to talk about what's being built, how this affects the investment markets, and what's going to happen to the idea of money itself. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the mark of the beast. Okay, I want to start this video with a little preface. I'm not saying that a digital ID is automatically evil. I'm not saying that a digital dollar is the end of freedom. I'm not even saying that Sam Altman is some bad guy building the mark of the beast. Any one of these things on their own, you could argue, has a reasonably good explanation. Like a digital ID is really convenient. I've lost my ID so many times before, it'd be nice just to have it on my phone. A programmable money could lower the risk of fraud. That's also nice. And cameras can make neighborhoods safer. These are all genuinely true and good reasons, but here's the thing. They're all being built together at the same time by connected institutions that'll be managed by a system that has never existed before. And it's the combination of them that allows for the centralization of power in a way that was never possible in human history. Now, here's something that's going to blow your mind. One of the main companies that's going to be building the surveillance and data infrastructure for this system is called Palantir. You've probably heard of it.
Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them.
Check out Palantir shares surging 22% after the company cited a boom in demand for its AI software from the U.S. government.
We're doing it. We're doing it. And I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am.
There's been a lot of videos about this company, and people that invested in this stock a couple years ago made a lot of money. But what does Palantir actually do? Palantir is a data analytics company founded by Peter Thiel, and it works mostly with governments, intelligence agencies, and militaries around the world. Now, maybe you knew that, but what you might not have known is what Palantir means.
In Lord of the Rings, a Palantir stone is a magical object that allows its users to predict the future or to see what's going on in a remote location.
It was originally created by the elves. It was meant to be used for good purposes. It is potentially a very dangerous technology. It's very powerful.
The name comes from J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And in that story, the Palantiri are ancient seeing stones, and they let whoever holds them see anything, anywhere, at any time. They are the all-seeing eyes of Middle-earth. And in that story, Sauron uses them, not just to watch, but to manipulate Middle-earth, to show people only what he wants them to see. What is that in the modern day? That's the algorithm. To make people believe things that aren't necessarily true. It feeds people their worst impulses and fears. Now, I'm not saying this is a prophecy of the Bible, but I am saying that symbolism like this doesn't happen by accident. And having said all that, let me explain how all of this is going to work. Catherine Austin-Fitts says that this system is made up of 3 different parts. And I think the easiest way to understand the digital control grid is to look at each one of them separately, and then I want to show you how they all connect. The first pillar is programmable money, which they say is needed in a world where AI will replace all the jobs. The second pillar is a global digital identity system. And the third pillar is the cameras that are going to watch everything we do. Now, if we fast forward to today, 2026, all three of these pillars are either already built or they're in the process. So let me explain the first part of this story, which is money. And speaking of money, our digital identity and our data is being collected and sold. And since I'm on YouTube, I get a lot of random phone calls and emails. And that's because right now there are hundreds of companies called data brokers that are legally collecting our personal information, like our names, our home address, phone number, and even our relatives, and selling it to anyone with a credit card. And that's why this segment is sponsored by Delete Me. I've personally been a member since April 2024, and they've scanned thousands of listings and found over 50 brokers selling my info. Thankfully, Delete Me has removed them, and they've easily saved me over 14 hours of trying to do this myself. Delete Me just runs in the background automatically, and I don't have to do anything. They were just named the #1 data removal service by Wirecutter, and real people are actually doing the removal. It's not some outsourced third party. It'll help protect you from the risks of your data being out there in the wrong hands. It takes about 5 minutes to set up. The link is down below, or you can go to joindeleteme.com/Andre20 to get 20% off. Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring this segment, and now let's get back to it. Okay, so let's talk about that first part, money. And I want to start with something really basic. Right now, the dollar in your bank account is just a number. It has no rules attached to it. You can spend it on whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, for the most part. You can give it to whoever you want as well, and the bank might ask questions if you move a big amount, but fundamentally, the money is yours and it's what's called neutral. It doesn't care what you spend it on. Programmable money is different because that money comes with conditions fused into the currency itself. So imagine you get a paycheck and it's only valid for a certain amount of time before it expires. Or it can only be spent within your state. Or it can't be used to buy certain things, maybe a certain cryptocurrency, or meat because of a carbon policy, or energy is just too expensive. Now, I'm not saying that these specific rules are coming tomorrow. I'm just saying that the technology to do all of this already exists, and the legal framework to deploy it is being built right now. In the United States, for example, the Genius Act was passed in 2025. That law created the official regulatory framework for stablecoins, aka digital dollars issued on a blockchain. Now, Catherine Austin Fitts points out that buried inside the Genius Act is a requirement that all stablecoin issuers must connect to a Treasury Department pipe, one that applies KYC, know your customer rules, and anti-money laundering rules, and sanctions enforcement. And once this connection exists, it can be integrated with anything, including a social credit system. What's a social credit system, right? A social credit system is basically a score that gets assigned to you based on your behavior. It's going to measure things like, did you pay your bills on time? Score goes up. Did you jaywalk or post something critical of the government online, or associate with someone that the system flagged as a problem? Score goes down. And your score determines what you'll be allowed to do. A high score means you get access to better loans, faster travel, more opportunities. A low score means you can't buy a plane ticket. You can't get certain jobs. This is already a proven model in China.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
In fact, over 30 million flights and train trips were blocked in a single year because of this system. They want you, quote, on your best behavior.
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on.
Now, the stablecoin companies say that they would never do this, but the infrastructure to do this is already technically possible. Now, at the same time in Europe, Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Commission, said, and this is a direct quote, "It is essential to swiftly adopt the regulation on the establishment of the digital euro."
It is thus essential to swiftly adopt the regulation on the establishment of the digital euro.
And all of this is sort of framed as innovation, right? As a necessity for the changing world order. Now, beyond this ability to program money, there's actually another reason why central planners want to do this. And the theory behind why they want to do this is to be able to offload their debt onto the rest of the world. And that's because in 2026, The United States government is running a deficit that is completely unsustainable. Foreign countries that used to buy U.S. Treasury bonds, the countries that buy our debt, the debt that funds our government, they're now buying less of it. The traditional wholesale market for U.S. debt is getting smaller. And it's getting smaller because nations are trusting the U.S. less and less, especially in the context of the Iran war. So how do you save the empire? Stablecoins.
Еще раз простыми словами. У них сейчас валютный 35-триллионный долг. Они его загоняют в крипту в облако, обесценивают и начинают с нуля.
Because if you can get hundreds of millions of people around the world to hold your digital dollars on their smartphones, which are essentially just treasury bills wrapped in an app, you've just found a new market for U.S. debt. That's where private corporations will be able to issue their own coins and pay their own yields with their own perks and benefits, and that's how you can export your debt into the global retail market. And that props up demand for treasuries. It preserves dollar dominance. And as a bonus, every single transaction will be visible, trackable, and in theory, programmable. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, which is the biggest asset manager in the world, has already said that they plan to eventually trade all stocks and all bonds as digital tokens on the blockchain.
And that means every stock, every bond will have its own, basically, CUSIP. It'll be on one general ledger. Every investor, you and I, will have our own number, our own identification.
Every stock you own, every bond, and every asset will be on a programmable ledger. That is a multi-$100 trillion market. And once it's there, the rules that govern your money can be changed at any time by whoever controls that system. So that is the first pillar. It's the money. The money is the foundation. But to make it work, you need to know who is spending what. Which brings us to pillar 2. Pillar 2 is identity. Because here's the problem that programmable money creates. If our money's digital and it has rules, you need a way to enforce the rules on the right person. Because the system needs to know that you are you. You're not an AI behind some deep fake. Which means the money part and the identity part have to be connected. And this is not speculation. The Bank of International Settlements, which is basically the central bank of all central banks, it's the granddaddy bank, and the United Nations, right? Both of them have put out documentation that digital IDs and CBDCs are designed to go together. So how do you build a global identity system? Because people would never vote for that. The way you would do it is that you make it so convenient and so useful for everyday life that people will line up voluntarily to hand over their biometric data, which is exactly what's happening. Go back to World ID. Sam Altman's company did not launch this as a government program, right? They launched it as a solution to a real problem. How do you prove that you are a human being in a world full of AI? It's a genuinely good question. And the answer he came up with is scan your eyeball, get a credential, and use it everywhere. Tinder uses it so that you know your match is real. DocuSign uses it so that contracts are tied to verified human beings. Zoom uses it so you know that the person on the other side is not a deepfake. Right? Every single use case is completely reasonable, which is why 18 million people have already signed up to it. The dangerous part about it, though, is that you're giving a private company a biometric signature that is unique and irreplaceable. With a password, for example, you could change it any time. You can get a new credit card, but you can't get a new set of eyeballs. And once the data exists, once it's been harvested and collected, it can be subpoenaed, hacked, or even sold. It can be given to the government. And the company's privacy policy today does not guarantee what happens to your data in 10 years, under different laws, under different political conditions, right? And biometric collection is not just coming from World ID. You might have noticed that every time you travel, you get your biometrics taken. Things like fingerprints and facial recognition. It's everywhere, in almost every country you visit. That's already the standard at most international borders. So now the question is, how does this connect to the first part? Scott McCullough says, when the next pandemic comes, and there will be a next pandemic, maybe the hantavirus or whatever they'll call it, it'll be way more digital of an experience than the last one.
When the next, when Fauci's next pandemic shows up, whether it's next year or the year after, I can assure you that we're going to have another effort to impose this kind of control state. And this time it will probably be far more digital.
And those of us who choose not to comply, whether it's a vaccine or a quarantine or something else, they will use this infrastructure to deny access to your basic human rights. Because all of this is technological, though, there doesn't have to be a law. We saw a preview of this with vaccine passports. In some countries, you can go into a restaurant or a gym or a concert without showing a digital health certificate. Some people were forced to get vaccines, otherwise they were not allowed to come to work. But that was temporary, though. The infrastructure that made this possible is now permanent. So when you combine Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, what you get is a system where every transaction you make is attached to who you are and what you've done and whether you're in compliance. But there's still one more thing. None of this will work at scale unless there's some physical infrastructure that can monitor everything you're doing in the real world. And that's Pillar 3. So Pillar 3 is the hardware. Right now, there is an arms race to build out energy and AI infrastructure. Why? If you ask the optimistic investor, they might tell you, well, because money, stock markets, profits, efficiency, right? But if you ask a pessimistic investor, they might say, do you really think that there is an arms race for energy so that you could use Claudebot and image generators more efficiently? Maybe it's because the energy that's needed to manage and consolidate all the cameras, all the biometrics, and all the data is going to be massive, right? That's why there's a huge push for technologies like spatial control. It's this ability to track where people are and then express that location in real time mathematically. The FCC has been trying to override controls on where cell towers can be placed, so they can be installed every 400 to 700 feet, which would be close enough together that your phone's location can be triangulated at all times, indoors or outdoors, and whether you have location services turned on or not. There's even Wi-Fi, which can apparently locate where you are in real time inside your own house. And then above that, there's now commercial satellites that can beam Wi-Fi directly to devices on the ground, which means even if you have no connection, the network can still reach you. Now, why would they want to do any of this? It's because that will allow for the ability to program your money specifically, such that it might not work more than a mile from your house. This applies to your car as well. There's something called the kill switch. Congressman Thomas Macy is trying to remove it, but it is now legally required in every new car sold in America. It's a switch that can remotely turn off your car. That's the law right now.
But there is a law that states that every vehicle manufactured is going to have a kill switch in it. The car itself will monitor your driving. And if the car thinks that you're not doing a good job driving, it will disable itself. So the car dashboard becomes your judge, your jury, and your executioner.
That's why Pillar 3 is the hardware. Because think about what it actually takes to run a social credit system at scale, tracking hundreds of millions of people's financial transactions, their physical movements, their online behavior, their compliance status, and then you have to apply different rules to different people in real time. That is almost an incomprehensible amount of data processing, and you need the most powerful computing infrastructure ever built to do it, which is exactly why it's being built right now at a speed and scale that has no historical comparison. But in order for the system to work, all of this has to be stored and interpreted in one place. Someone has to turn this data into a unified picture of every person, right? You have to build a risk profile. And that's exactly what Palantir was built to do.
Co-founded by Peter Thiel back in 2003, its mission, providing software that customers use to integrate volumes of data from images to spreadsheets into a central platform where it can then be securely analyzed and interpreted.
It was built to fuse data from multiple sources into one story about your life. It was built for the military and intelligence agencies, and it is now being integrated into healthcare systems, financial systems, and government infrastructure around the world, tied together and processed by AI. So Pillar 1 controls what your money can do. Pillar 2 knows who you are. And Pillar 3 tracks where you are and what you're doing. And when those systems are fully connected, and they're being connected right now, the result is that everything you buy, everywhere you go, every transaction, and every behavior is attached to your verified identity that is monitored in real time and given a social score. And if your behavior falls outside the system, it just sort of turns off a dial. Like maybe your credit card stops working at the gas station. Oh wait, you drive an electric car, do you? Well, that's too bad. You can't go beyond your city limits. Or maybe your ID fails verification at the airport, so you can't travel. Or your account gets flagged. Hey, we noticed you traveled a mile beyond the allowable limit since you didn't get a vaccine, right? You're a threat. That is the digital control grid. And the reason I'm making this video right now in May of 2026 is that in order to get this system the kickstart that it needs, there has to be a crisis in order for the central planners to have their opportunity to fix said crisis.
In this new world, we have to accept transparency, and I would even say total transparency. Everything is going to be transparent, and we have to get used to it. We have to behave that way. It becomes, how should I put it, part of your personality. But if you have nothing to hide, there's no need to be afraid.
So tying all of this together, one of the most interesting theories I've seen that explains what's happening in the world today is not just for the military-industrial complex and its profits. It's not just for an energy disruption and a rerouting. It's basically for the event that makes all of this possible one way or another. And the countries that are trying to resist the vassalization into the financial markets will need to eventually get in line. Because think about what happened during COVID. Within weeks, governments around the world rolled out contact tracing apps, vaccine passports, emergency powers, digital health certificates, things that would have taken a decade to pass through normal legislation, but they were passed instantly because people were scared. And scared people accept things they would never accept otherwise. That was a test. And a plausible theory is that the Hormuz closure is doing the same, but it's putting pressure financially. Because supply chains are disrupted again. Food prices are going up, and they're becoming digital at the grocery stores right now. Gas is also back at near record highs. Consumer confidence just hit its lowest level since 2008. And foreign countries that used to buy US debt are buying less of it. The debt to GDP ratio has now crossed 125%. And what all that does is it creates financial stress and a consequence. That consequence is an impossible choice for the central bankers. Do you save your currency or do you save your bond market? Because you can't do both. If you raise rates to defend the dollar, the bond market collapses. If you cut rates to save the bonds, the dollar loses value. So which one are they going to pick? I think that's one of the main reasons why the stock market could be going up. Because the market is betting that they're going to pick devaluing the dollar and saving the bond market is the only way out. Option number 2, right? And while we bail out the bond markets, the central planners have no choice but to continue the build out of this digital control grid. And how devaluing the dollar looks like to us is the price of everything, the price of stuff, including assets, goes up. This is the system's way of fighting back. We are digitizing and uploading this debt onto the rest of the world with CBDCs, devaluing the dollar, and the markets are ripping. So I guess time will tell if this prophecy is going to come true or if all of this is a coincidence. But I think at this point, the evidence and the symbolism makes it really hard to ignore. And I think it's really interesting. Now, if you want to see how I'm personally preparing for all of this and the specific assets I'm holding and what I think of this market and what I'm actually doing with my own money, those videos live in the members section. I also post more videos there and you'll get access to the videos earlier than the main channel. And if that's useful to you, the link is down below. Thank you for the support. It allows me to take on less sponsors over time and continue to make videos like this one. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this crazy theory. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week. Take care.